Welcome to Sachs Realty's Tuesday Night Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything real estate. Each week, we deliver expert information enabling you to make better informed decisions while keeping more money in your pocket. If you're interested in real estate, this is your show. Welcome to our Tuesday Night Live. We are here with attorney Dennis Block, all the way California, and we released a video with him on Saturday about landlords and tenants and everything that's going on in America right now with our housing market and the unaffordability and there's such a big divide. There's a lot of contention right now with home buyers that are trying to buy a home and they're priced out of the market, and for many, many years now, about a third of the buyers of single-family residences in the U.S. have been businesses or landlords buying housing to rent. And of course, rents are very expensive. But there's a lot of controversy with the way that lawmakers are looking at property rights, and they not only affect really landlords, they also affect homeowners. So if you own a home, this is going to be a great podcast tonight, because we're going to talk about how a lot of the policies that start on the West Coast in California end up making their way into other states. Some of these policies look almost identical. Some of them have similarities. But I think California has some of the biggest issues and the biggest problems facing property owners. And really, a lot of what we've been dealing with over the last several of years really came about during the pandemic. Of course, like we've never seen in history before, at least in our lifetime, with being shut down, kept at home, and basically for many not needing to pay their mortgage payment or their rent. And we're going to talk about some of the implications of this. We're also going to go over tonight some issues with insurance companies and the way that rates have gone up in some states are getting canceled. And there has been some new studies that have been put out, one in Florida, where they're saying basically that the insurance companies have been dishonest in their allegations on why they've raised and canceled rates. We're going to look at some of that tonight. We're also going to talk about some of the social issues that are destroying our neighborhoods, and of course that also affects our property value. So Melissa is not here at the office tonight. We have some crazy weather going on right now. It's pouring down rain. We might get 3-4 inches of rain here in Maryland tonight. If you guys are local, or if you sent this weather pattern to us, thank you very much. If it hit your state yesterday or earlier today, but we have wind gusts are supposed to be up 50 mile an hour. I don't know. We'll see. But Melissa, she was afraid. Yes. She was afraid. She was scared. She was scared to be in the car.
I was nervous.
Yeah. So here we are. But anyway, Melissa.
Hello. Trees are down, but I am here safe and happy to be with you on another Tuesday night. We have some great comments coming in already. We have John here. There was a great video on Saturday. I hope the rest of the country doesn't turn into California. So we had that one coming in. And then we had another comment here. We see all over the U.S. that squatters without a tenancy contract have more rights than the owner of the property. So really very fortunate, Dennis, to be able to have you on our live show this evening and kind of give us the overview of what's going to be happening and what's the future for landlords. So really looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Yeah, Dennis, tell everybody who you are, and I'm honored to have you on our show. Our comments from Saturday was a mixed bag, as always. It's expected. You have a lot of misinformed, I'm going to say a lot of misinformation that's out there, and I believe that's why some of the hostility, against landlords. I mean, I get I understand the frustration, but it still doesn't make what's happening right. But introduce yourself to everybody and give them an overview of what you've been doing to defend property rights.
Well, this is my 47th year representing income property owners. I know everybody is shocked because they know how good looking I am, but still 47 years. My firm consists of 25 attorneys now, plus support staff. And we started out, I started out doing an eviction for my father-in-law 50 years ago while I was in law school. And then what happened was when I became an attorney, and Todd, you'll notice this, that in life, things are always dependent upon luck and timing. People could be the greatest singer in the world. You're never going to get discovered. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, if they were born 30 years before they never would have been who they were because computers didn't exist 30 years before. So it's all about luck and timing. For myself, I know when I couldn't get a job when I first got out of law school, so I started my own practice, and two things happened. That was the Supreme Court said lawyers could advertise. You guys don't even know this, but in the beginning, lawyers couldn't advertise. It was a case with Jacoby and Myers that finally punched the state bars of allowing attorneys finally to advertise. And now you can't turn on a TV show without seeing somebody talking about a traffic accident. And of course, the other thing was that since I was representing landlords, a little city by the name of Los Angeles instituted rent control back in 1979. So with that, our firm kind of took off in terms of representing property owners. We see you called it, property rights. Really, you shouldn't really call it property rights. You should call it tenants' rights, because the tenants are the only one who have rights. And if anybody's doubting what I'm saying, when you talk about the pandemic, we had literally close to 3.5 years where landlords could not legally collect their rents or enforce their property rights. 3.5 years. I think the pandemic maybe affected economically people for a year, maybe a year and a half. But this went on for 3.5 years where landlords couldn't support their families based on the fact that they could not bring forth an eviction. They could not bring forth a civil lawsuit. Where in life, what industry where they're telling people that they got to give their goods and services and they have to wait, that the rent, quote, is deferred, which of course we all know it's not deferred. Everybody's losing that rent. But that's what happened during the pandemic. And during that time, number one, people's salaries were increasing with inflation rate. We saw the price of servicemen who would come to our buildings. That kept getting higher and higher. And of course, during this time, you had to pay your mortgage. The banks weren't forgiving that. They would foreclose on you. Some of them did have some leeway where they would give you 3 months, but we're talking about 3.5 years, certainly for the LA area, Los Angeles area, that you had to do that. You had to keep the upkeep of your building during this time. And yet there was no income coming in. If anybody out there is a real estate broker, can you imagine selling a house, the deal closes, and you're waiting for your remuneration, your commission, and they're telling you, oh, you're going to get it in 3.5 years. So when we talk about, quote, the downtrodden tenant, really what we need to be looking at is what the abuse was that was put onto the landlords during this time period. I do have a website that I do want to mention. It is called evict123.com. That's EVICT123.com. And I do a live Zoom meeting, which you can catch on YouTube too, every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There's the website. And if you go to that website and click on join us at our next Zoom meeting, which will be January 13th, if you like what you're hearing now, or even if you don't, click in and you can be part of the Zoom meeting, or you can also, it'll tell you how to get to the YouTube live channel. So it's kind of an interesting talk show that we do once a week. But going back to landlords, the issues were that with escalating property taxes, having to pay your mortgage payment, basically we had many landlords that just went out of business, that they lost their property or had to do a quick sale to some of the larger institutions that could afford these types of waiting periods. And again, certainly in California, the rule was, well, we're not taking your money away, because they couldn't do that, because that would be unconstitutional. So they just claimed that this was, quote, a deferment in rent. Your rent's being deferred. So for that 3.5 years that the tenant owed you the money, that he claimed COVID, even though we saw maybe a couple of new cars drive up in their driveways, or we saw them vacationing on social media to Cancun and other locations. We had to wait. But right now, as in Los Angeles, February 1st, 2024, coming up next month, we now can go after these tenants. So all we have to do is go down to our local small claims court. We're going to file a lawsuit because now we want our money, and now legally we can collect it. And as the politician said, this was merely a deferred rent. But if I file this small claims court, how am I going to serve them? You got to serve them. Where'd they move to? I don't know where they moved to. They could have moved to another state. So it's going to be very difficult to proceed forward with this. And the fact that even if you get a judgment against these people, who says you're going to collect? I mean, my firm also does, in addition to representing landlords and income property owners, we do debt collection. And who says you're going to be able to collect on this? If you could collect, maybe 25% of the cases will be collected. So the fact was that the politicians created these laws, and their sole basis was to take care of tenants. But it's one thing under social welfare where you have the total populace is taking care of the downtrodden. Here you're asking one landlord to support one tenant, where, as I said on our last telecast, I have clients where this tenant owes me $40,000, this tenant owes me $50,000, this tenant owes me $25,000. It just goes on and on and on, that the lost revenue. Now, was every tenant taking advantage of COVID and not paying the rent? And the answer is, of course not. But there was certainly a big percentage that was. And I would guarantee you that of the people who claimed COVID, at least for the later years, as to the reason why they weren't paying the rent, I would say 95% of them were not telling the truth. They were just gaming the system, where just as if you had a sign in front of a bank, come on in and take samples. That's basically what the politicians were allowing them to do. So we also have, of course, in California, we have escalating property taxes. The property taxes goes up, especially when buildings are sold. So we had to pay our property taxes. We had to pay our mortgage payments. And even the city of Los Angeles, which requires landlords pay their, because everything's under rent control, so they have regulatory dues. We had to pay those. And yet they didn't suspend any of that. They asked tenants, okay, your right to, your obligation to pay rent is suspended. They didn't do that for landlords, even on their own regulatory fees. We had to pay that. And God forbid that a tenant had a problem with his unit, and he hadn't paid rent in 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. We've seen the whole gamut. Even in that situation, we would have to still make repairs on their unit. Otherwise, we'd get something from building and safety, and then it would be followed up with a city attorney's misdemeanor hearing if it wasn't. So what has happened to landlords is truly an abortion in terms of our rights, just truly a taking of our rights. And that's why my firm does jealously guard property rights, which is what our mantra has been for the last 47 years that I've been in practice with that. Any comments, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about one issue, and that's the, landlord tenant issue. But there's many cases across the the U.S. where property rights are being taken from owners that aren't even renting their home. I'll give you just a few examples. I mean, you look at, I've spent the last more than 30 years as a contractor in residential construction. Try and do something at your own house. I mean, you want a fence built at your house, you need a permit for it. You may need a variance to put a fence on your own property. You could be told no, but you're going to spend $3,000 or $5,000 getting a variance for a fence permit. I know here in Maryland, to give you an example, we have a property right now where we're trying to put a fence up, and it's sort of in a very commercialized area, office buildings around, a lot of traffic. But the way that the subdivision is laid out, the fence that's going across the back of this particular property happens to be partially in the front yard of a rear neighbor. So now we have to get a variance for that property, which requires posting a sign, having a public hearing, hiring an engineer, an attorney, just to put a fence up, a 6-foot privacy fence across this back of the property. Now, the government was fine taking the money to subdivide the land in the first place, was fine assessing the additional property, $750,000, $800,000 property every single year, collecting the property taxes for that on both parcels. But that's just one example. Try putting a shed at your property. I think if you go over a 10 by 12 shed, you need a permit to put a shed on your property. So it's overreaching. It's not just people think about, what it is to own a property, but they don't realize that you just can't do what you want with your own property. You can be told no, and you could spend $5,000, $10,000 to get what you want and still lose. So, I mean, it's sickening. And now we're looking at, and I get it, look, I've been a real estate investor for 25 plus years. Dennis, you and I have spoken about this before. We're both exiting what, residential we have. I mean, we're going deeper into commercial because of the restrictions here in Baltimore City. Our agents, they don't even want to put for sale signs up on vacant properties in Baltimore City because squatters break in the properties and it takes you 7 months to get them out. You just can't. Squatters, one of the comments, squatters have more rights than the property owner. And it's just getting, so what we want to do, and believe me, man, I want to dive into your state because a lot of your policies, unfortunately, come over here to the East Coast, like I said, in one form or another, and affect many, many people. But we have other neighboring states, close by, states like New York, that really are following suit with your policies. We're going to show some of the, some of the data. The homelessness that you guys have is like you've topped, I think, since 2018, maybe before that, but I have the data. You've topped homelessness in your state. I think actually, we'll pull the data, but I think close to 28% of the homelessness population is in your state, which is crazy. And, and not just that, you have some of the worst crime statistics. You have smash and grab crimes that you've made headline news. I think California is teaching the smash and grabbers throughout the rest of the country. And, it literally the same things. I mean, I've talked about it on my show. I go down to the Walgreens down the street. If I want to get deodorant, I have to press a button and wait 5 minutes as I'm listening to this annoying recording that says, customer assistance needed in the personal, whatever hygiene department. I don't know, whatever they said over and over and over again until somebody came with a key so that I could get a $4 deodorant because of the amount of theft that goes on, and all of this stuff affects our property values. It costs us more money in our products. So these policies out there, they suck. right? So, but I do want to, I want to take, and we're going to take questions, guys. We're live tonight. Look, we've got Dennis. We've got the man. He has done over 250,000 evictions, not because he wants to, because he needs to defend property rights, and people get into houses. They take advantage of, there are scenarios where the landlords are bad, but what we're talking about is the policy stepping in and saying that you don't have rights as an owner. You keep paying your bills, you keep paying your taxes, you keep paying everything, and this tenant doesn't have to pay you. And we're going to pull up some, even here in Maryland, guys. If you're listening from Maryland, I think I'm going to say this, and I've said it many times on my show. I think we are at the end of mom and pop landlords. This is like the first time I've ever heard of it happening at this scale. We're going to see a massive collapse in multifamily housing. We've got a glut coming on. We have a financial banking crisis in the multifamily sector, and rents are going to be pushed down. Landlording, I tell you what, the landlords are going to be institutional investors. And I'm sure Wall Street's just standing by, because they're the only ones that can sustain taking these kinds of hits and these losses, because most of the time they're not even dealing with their money. They're dealing with investors' money. But anyway, let's pull up. I want to pull up an article here because I want to first start out because I thought this was interesting about insurance. I have a friend of mine. I have a couple friends that are real estate brokers in Florida. And, we talk about, and Dennis, I know you've got issues with insurance in some of your bad weather areas in California. But, what we've been hearing in the housing market is that all of these claims in Florida, breaking these poor insurance companies' bank accounts, and that they have to cancel insurance policies, raise rates, and they have to push to more of like a socialist state-owned insurance company that will pick them up once they get denied by these, I think 13 insurance companies have pulled out of Florida. But I thought this article was very interesting because it says that frivolous lawsuits didn't cause surge in insurance premiums in Florida, study finds. And it goes on to say here that homeowner lawsuits against insurance companies did not cause record losses and rapidly escalating insurance premiums in Florida, according to a new study. It says that the report found that litigated claims in the Tri-County region in 2022 were 6 times more expensive than claims that did not result in a lawsuit. More than 58,000 claims that were litigated in 2022 made up less than 8% of the claims closed that year, and less than 1% of the policies in effect at that time. Insurance companies spent about $580 million on litigated claims out of nearly $16 billion that Floridians paid in premiums. I just thought that was interesting, caught my eye. It says that Florida lawmakers, by the way, their legislative session started today. They're promising that they're going to do something for you Floridians. If you guys are in Florida, they're going to try and do some big measures to try and lower your rates. Homeowners, there's about 1.3 million policyholders in Florida. So what are you seeing, Dennis, with insurance rates in California?
Most of these State Farm and all of the big insurance companies are now pulling out of California. They don't want to insure homes anymore. They don't want to insure multi-unit buildings. It's really 2 reasons. Number one, and I've seen this, it's number one, notwithstanding that article, it's frivolous lawsuits. They are going after landlords. There's firms that specialize in this, and they'll claim that the tenant had to live in an uninhabitable place and an apartment which is getting $2,000. We had a mediation today, just today, and the attorney who was on was representing the landlord there was an insurance company as well. And this tenant had a problem with pests, roaches, whatever. The landlord had it treated 4 times. It wasn't like somebody who wasn't taking care of the problem. And the insurance company, they started coming in wanting $2.4 million at this settlement conference, dropped it to 1.2, and it settled today for a tenant who's paying a couple $1,000 a month, and where the landlord had 4 times went in with pest control to try to solve this problem. It settled today for $500,000, where the insurance company is picking up, I think, about $400,000, and my client is going to agree to pay $100,000. But this is happening all the time, and I can't really blame the insurance companies. Insurance companies, like everybody else, is trying to earn a dollar. And when you're in a market where you can't make any money, then guess what? Then you're going to get out of that market. So we're seeing claim and claim and claim again, where these people are racking up so much money, these attorneys filing these lawsuits, and the insurance companies are caving in. The other reason why insurance companies, probably even a bigger reason, is because we have a lot of forest mismanagement, so that these neighborhoods just can light up with fires, and then the insurance company is on the hook. I guess that's part of the reason in Florida with hurricanes and everything else that's going on. But obviously an insurance company, and I don't fault them, are in business to make money, and they don't mind taking some risk, but they don't want to take a bunch of risk. But when you're facing a bunch of lawsuits from marauding attorneys, in fact, if you think about it, Todd, it's only 99% of the attorneys that give the rest of us a bad name. That was
Must be the same thing with agents.
Of course,
Yes.
with agents. But anyway, when you see all these frivolous lawsuits being filed and where the insurance companies are just paying off, what does that do to income property owners? As you said, by the time you get through the building requirements, when you get where they're coming out to your property, inspecting your property and telling you this needs fixing. I have a few apartment buildings, but 2 of those apartment buildings, I was told that I had to do what they call soft retrofitting for earthquake. And the fees for each building was $125,000. One was another $150,000. These buildings are under rent control. One was in a city called West Hollywood. West Hollywood forced us to do this. We did it. Could we offset that against what the tenant's paying? Because we're under rent control, so I can't raise the rent. Would they allow us to pass through this capital improvement to the tenants? West Hollywood said no. The city of Los Angeles said yes. But here's what the city did. Number one, it's amortized over 5 years. It's amortized over 5 years as to 50% that the tenant has to pay, and the maximum was $37 a month. So you get $37 extra per month. You can't even get 3 cups of coffee for that price. And then you would be able to recoup those losses over 5 years. So in other words, it's just a situation where everything is put on the onerous of the landlord. Let's talk about the concept of rent control. People need affordable housing. I'm not arguing that. However, if you are in a rent control building and therefore your rents are limited, what if you earn $2 million a year? Are you entitled to that rent control protection? And the answer is yes, because rent control, unlike social welfare, doesn't just give it to the needy. It gives it to everybody. You don't have to apply for it and show, hey, I really need some help for this. So basically, they're telling the populace that, forget the concept. What was that concept? Oh, I remember. It's free economy. Forget that concept that made this country great. They're saying that for your goods and services, we're telling you what you can charge, regardless of whether the person needs it. Regardless. There was an old story. The old Mayor Karch of New York was in a rent-controlled apartment. That was the mayor of New York in a rent-controlled apartment where you couldn't raise their rents or you only did it a certain percentage. Here in the Los Angeles area, where you couldn't do a rent increase from March of 2020, and this is with all the inflation and the additional expenses of running your building. So from March of 2020, now finally, February 1st, 2024, that's almost 4 years, we're now finally entitled to a rent increase. And in that 4-year period, with the inflation is what it is, and also not being able to collect rent from those people who are claiming COVID as a reason why they couldn't, or justifying their reason why they couldn't pay, we're now entitled in the city of Los Angeles, let's do a drum roll, somebody there, a whopping 4%. 4% after 4 years of not being able to increase our rents and having so many tenants not pay the rent, they're finally begrudgingly giving us a 4% rent increase. This is a theft of property. It's a theft of property on every level that you could possibly imagine with regard to what's happening. So the concept of rent control is that, people need affordable housing, and landlords are in the business of providing housing. So let's tag their industry, because people need affordable housing. But I can tell you that people also need to have baby formula. They also need to have medical procedures and drugs. These are all necessary issues too for our society. They need food, but food is escalating. How come there's not price controls on food and baby formula and diapers and everything else? Why is it that only one industry is impacted? And that's because our names are income property owners. So yes,
why? So why is it? Why is it?
It's just very popular for politicians who want to get reelected.
What's the end game?
Yeah,
there's more tenants than, so the concept is there's more tenants than there are landlords. But what's the end game? Is the end game, and I know you represent both. I mean, you represent mom and pops and institutional investors as well. I mean, is the end game to bankrupt mom and pop landlords? Just another attack on small business, and just to either take it over, to have the government take over the building, and be the landlord, or is it the end game to feed it to the Wall Street businesses that back these politicians?
I think foremost, and the initial plan, is that they want to get reelected. That it is very popular if I'm giving favors to tenants, that and the guy on the other side of the aisle is talking about property rights and what's fair for people, then I think that they're just, as you stated, there's so many more tenants that they're guaranteeing that people are going to vote for their side versus the other side. I think that's the foremost. The other thing is, I think they are trying to knock out mom and pops. The far majority of my clients are mom and pop owners. They own maybe 10 units, and maybe they live in their own building, and yet they're faced with all these expenses, all these property taxes, and mortgage payments, and insurance that they can't even get anymore. We have something here, as you were talking about in Florida, called the California Fair Plan, and which gives you meager insurance. If you're trying to buy a house in Malibu, an expensive house in Malibu, good luck getting insurance. The same thing was true. My daughter got a house in a community called Calabasas, which is where I am. And we had to go on the California Fair Plan. Just that she has this incredibly nice house. And we had to go on this fair plan because you can't get insurances to insure properties anymore. And again, a lot of it's dealing with frivolous lawsuits and also mismanagement of forest areas.
So Dennis, I want to take a couple questions here in a minute, but before, I kind of back to the end game. So essentially what we're doing is we're teaching people that they don't have to pay, and they'll be protected under whatever policies. They don't have to pay. I mean, we've already, over the last 3 years, we're teaching people that own houses that they don't have to pay because we're giving stimulus. 24 states, by the way, 24 states still have COVID money. It's still active. The housing assistance fund that's part of the 2021, July of 2021 they added this Housing Homeowners Assistance Fund, HAF, to the CARES Act, where they gave almost $10 billion, okay, to the states to distribute to people that were still struggling with COVID-related, housing, having trouble paying their housing costs, housing-related costs, insurance, utilities, taxes, mortgage payments. Still, 24 states still has money available. The crazy part about it is, and this is where a lot of people, they disagree with me when I say that we're looking at a massive housing recession and a debt crisis that we haven't seen anything like this in probably dating back to the Depression. The only reason is because right now housing's too big to fail, so it's being, still propped up with stimulus. Still, banks are being propped up right now, and liquidity is being pumped into the banking industry. But there's still 24 states that are still able to hand out money. But here's the problem. When you look at the people that have applied for it, I mean, sometimes the states that, not all the states publish their data, but if, you go on the, HUD site, you can see which states do publish it. We're going to do a video actually on it Thursday. We'll release Thursday night. But not all states report. But of the states that reported, you should see the amount of applications that were filed that were denied. So we've got a major problem with people not being able to pay their mortgage payments right now. FHA, almost 10% delinquencies, constant bailouts there. But when we look at the end game, and I ask you, what's the end game in California? And because these people that are eventually going to get thrown out, they're going to have judgments on their credit report. They're not going to be able to rent again. All the rent controls are just damaging other tenants because the landlords need to, when they get a vacant apartment, they're just jacking the rents at that point because they have to subsidize the other tenants that aren't getting rent increases, right? But what's happening is your homelessness population is just blowing out of proportion. I just want to look here. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development estimated that more than 181,399 people were experiencing homelessness in California a year ago, January of 2023. And on this chart here that we have pulled up, you can see that I got some annoying box that's right in my line of sight here. You could see right there, California, 28%. So we have over 650,000 reported, and I know that number's off. How do they get that? I mean, what do they go? I mean, they go out on the street and they start counting heads. 653,000 reported here by the state, right? Drop down, California, right there, number one.
See, I think I'm ready to leave the state. I'm getting my ticket right now. Doom and gloom for the state. Well, first of all, with regard to, I don't think escalating housing costs is making for the homeless. I think the homeless is based on either mental illness or drug abuse. I think that's really the main cause of homelessness. And obviously the governments don't properly deal with it by either sending more money for mental services or for drug addictions. They're encouraging people to do drugs. You have places like in San Francisco where it's legal to be shooting up any kind of drugs. Nobody's getting arrested for this. So when you have this permissive society, this is what you're going to get, and it's just going to keep coming at you. You talked about how people are going to get judgments against them, and they're not going to be able to rent a house because you see that they've been evicted before. Well, that's not true in California. Let's talk about what California does so the rest of the country can follow suit too.
I knew you were going to go here.
When you file an eviction lawsuit against a tenant who legitimately didn't pay the rent, no excuse, okay? The record is sealed unless you can obtain a judgment within 2 months. So what do I mean by sealed? Unless you can get that judgment, which is almost impossible within 2 months, then anybody who does a search for that tenant to see if in fact he's ever been evicted, it doesn't show up on any public records. Even if you had the case number and you punch that into the court docket, it's going to show doesn't exist. So what they're doing is they're perpetuating tenants who go into a place, pay a little bit of money, then wait for the 4 or 5 months, however long it's going to take to get evicted. Their record is sealed. And maybe, as I was talking on our last show, that they'll negotiate with the help of their attorney who's asking for a jury trial in a silly unlawful detainer case for non-payment of rent. They'll negotiate with the landlord, say, hey, you know what? Pay me $10,000. Even though I owe you 6 months worth of rent, I want $10,000 and I'll leave. And the landlords are faced with a jury trial.
I don't want to interrupt you here, but I want you to explain what you're talking about here, because this is crazy to me. So just kind of explain what you start from the beginning with the
in
jury
California,
trial.
Every litigant has the right to a jury trial. Even if you have in your rental agreement or your contract that says no jury trials, both parties agree, both parties sign this, they have the right to ask for a jury trial. Well, of course, the landlord's never going to ask for a jury trial because obviously it extends the process and costs so much more money to litigate. But every tenant now is getting a free attorney, and every free attorney is asking for a jury trial. In other words, they don't have any faith that a judge would rule in favor of the tenant. So they ask for these jury trials. And we win 95% of the jury trials that we bring forth, 95%. But the problem with it is, obviously, it triples the cost or maybe quadruples the cost because there's so much more paperwork and it's so much more lengthy. Most unlawful detainer trials that are what we call a bench trial without a jury is taking an hour. A jury trial will take 3-4 days by the time you pick a jury. And you can imagine hiring an attorney for 3-4 days, not to mention all the paperwork that goes prior to going into court. So these tenants will ask for a jury trial. We're entitled to a quick trial date. So we'll request a trial date, and we're under the law, we're entitled to have a trial date within 21 days. So of course the court doesn't do that, but it comes in 30 days. So then we get down there, we're ready to go. We announce ready. And the court says, well, I'm sorry, we don't have enough jury pool. We can't send you out. So we're going to continue this for 30 more days. And then 30 days, we go back down there again. Client gets charged again. Any courtrooms available? No, sorry, come back in another 30 days. So this goes on for 3 to 4 months. Finally, we get to the point where we're now going to start a jury trial. And of course, the fees even get more escalated. You know, I have to feed my family too. And then the tenants during this time will finally walk over and say, okay, this is true as attorney. If you waive the rent and you agree that this record will be sealed for all of time, which it automatically is, but we could actually ask it to be unsealed. But now they're putting it as form of the judgment. And you pay me $10,000, I'll get out. And of course, the landlord will say, well, this is insane. But faced with going through a jury and the cost of the jury, and then, hey, Dennis, are you, if I go through the jury trial, are you 100% going to guarantee that I'm going to win the case? I think we're going to win. We win most of our cases, but I can't guarantee it. So he says, well, you know what? I want to take a sure thing. I got to get this guy out. Okay. Not only is he not paying the rent, he's damaging the property and creating disturbances for my other good tenants there. And the landlords will pay up. This is the formula in California, and it's a very successful formula for tenants' attorneys that go after landlords who have done nothing wrong, that the premises are totally habitable, the tenant just didn't pay the rent. And while we're on the subject, who in the last 2 years is financially impacted by COVID? Please raise your hand out there and tell me you're impacted by COVID. There is not one person on the planet Earth in the last 2 years that was impacted by COVID. Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, but certainly not within the last 2 years. The last time I checked, employers are dying to have people apply to them. We're looking for attorneys. We can't even find them. We're looking for paralegals. It's difficult to get people in. Look at restaurants. They can't keep people behind there. Anybody can get a job now. This COVID thing was the biggest hoax that was played upon our population and upon people who work for a living. And I know I'm getting a lot of heat right now, but God knows, take a look at really what's going on out there. This is what's going on out there, that people game this system to sit there and avoid their obligations. And people even the people who are getting PPP money or the employee retention things, everybody was taken from the government. All we have with our government now is that we have tremendous inflation. We have a debt that's out of control. And eventually someone's going to have to pay the piper on these types of things, Todd.
Yeah, well, we have more consumer debt. I mean, we gave out stimulus and tons of PPP and a lot of bailouts of mortgages, and they're still unable to make it work. So just giving, forgiving debt and paying people for bad decisions that they've made. I mean, look, there are plenty of people that legitimately went through hardship, and I understand that. I mean, but I do agree. I mean, nowhere near, the percentage of people that will take advantage. You give an inch, and they'll take a mile. That's crazy. So they play that game because if you're going to go through a 3-day jury trial, and the chances they could lose because they're going to drudge up whatever they can, and the attorney for the plaintiff is going to, point out the fact that the roaches and this and that, and they want to get awarded even more money and free rent. So the risk is there after the jury trial that they could lose. So the lawyer on the other side says, hey, give us $10,000, get rid of the rent and seal the deal so my tenant can get another place to rent and destroy that landlord too. Basically your client says, hey, I'll take that deal because if we go to court or we go to jury trial, I got to pay you for at least 3 days more. And that's if we can get a jury that particular day. Maybe it's another 3 months of going back to the courthouse. And the end result is they're going with the known. And those lawyers know that on the other side. Dennis, and by the way, are these tenants paying for these lawyers?
They're free.
They're free.
Free lawyers. But most of the time, what's happening, especially some of the private firms that do this, what they're doing is they're taking a third of the compensation. So that $10,000, they're going to get a third of that.
I was going to ask that.
They have cases lined up. So people are saying, well, that's not that much money for an attorney. These people have 300, 400, 500 cases lined up, and they're taking this on a daily basis. So it's really a bad situation for the landlord. And then these tenants are repeat offenders. So the record is sealed. And then sometimes even in the stipulated judgment that we agree to, it says you are required to give a neutral reference to the tenant. That's so if they say the guy's bad, he's got like the plague, you can't do that. So in California, in a lot of jurisdictions, and I know they have this in New York too, it's something called cashless bail. So the people go in, they rob the stores, and they don't have to pay any bail, and they get right out. And guess what they do? They go rob again because there's no harm to this. And the same thing is true with these tenants. I have evicted one set of tenant. This is going back for 12 years. I've evicted him 8 times. 8 times I've evicted the same person over and over again. We had one woman who was a total piece of work who rented this house in Malibu. And she was complaining every day, filing civil lawsuits against the landlord. And the landlord came to me, was in tears. She lived in Utah, very, very nice woman. She did everything she possibly could. This woman was just looking for everything. And of course, she was still paying the rent. And we finally got her on the basis that in her rental agreement, it said that if you make any misrepresentations on your application when you first rented, that's considered to be a major breach of this contract. So we looked her up and we found that she had been evicted before. So we actually evicted her on that violation of the contract, that she made misrepresentations. She said, have you ever been evicted before? No. So now fast forward 3 more months. I get another client calls me and says that, I just rented my house in Malibu and this woman's crazy. She's filing civil lawsuits. She can't be, everything she's asking for is crazy. There's just no the end to her wants on this thing. And I go, boy, does this sound familiar? I go, what's her name? Same person. But this time it was easy for me to find out that she had been evicted before because I evicted her before. So we got rid of her in the second case. So you see this all the time. And of course, these records tend to be sealed, which just allows people to continue to do this. And this costs the landlord money. And when you want to talk about escalating rents, what you do if you want to make rents escalate, make it more expensive for the landlord to do his business. And then you're right. One tenant is really going to be supporting the other tenant, certainly with rent control. Put on a bunch of regulations, make it more expensive. Then any new tenant coming in is going to have to pay that price. So also, I have an idea. If you want to make rents less, you want to make more supply and demand. You have more supply, then you're going to have the demand is less and rents will go down. So what you do is make crazy building codes so that it's so much more expensive. And even if you follow the codes, to get the inspector to come there and approve the work that was within the code, it's taking you 2 months. How much is that adding to your construction loans and everything else? So as I said before, you have to be crazy, out of your mind, to do any kind of a real estate project in California. Move anywhere. As I said, I had just recently I won't do it anymore. I just recently gone into a project in Las Vegas, which is much more friendlier to build. And of course, around the country, there's so many more places that are more friendlier to build. But in California, you really have to know exactly what you're doing. You're going to get hit with so much more expense. And what's the gain? So that you're going to get a tenant in there that's going to be under rent control and they're going to control you. In the state of California, every city has rent control. Every city. It used to be just the local jurisdictions like Santa Monica and Los Angeles would have these rent control, but now they passed statewide rent control. And there was a bill on the ballot, an initiative that was on the ballot. This is a few years ago, to institute statewide rent control. And myself and all the apartment associations and the realty groups went around and we tried to scare everybody this was going to be very bad, which we think it is. And also homeowners are now going to be, single family homeowners are now going to be subject. So we had enough people and we defeated this proposition 2/3 to 1. So there wouldn't institute statewide rent control. What happens? Next year, the state legislature passed it. It didn't matter that the populace on an initiative 2/3 to 1 had voted against it. Didn't matter. So now every city in the state of California, unless there's a local ordinance which will take control, you now have rent control.
That's coming everywhere. Let's take some questions, Melissa. I know we got some
we got a lot of super chats here. I'm going to scroll up. Bear with me one moment. Okay, great. So Dennis, we have this one first. Thank you so much for your super chat, Duke.
Thanks, Duke.
There are many bad actors I know. How can bad landlords be prevented? They hurt good landlords the most.
I think the fact that people have this misnomer that there are so many bad landlords is just what that is. It's a misnomer. This is media driven. It's politicians driven. It's tenants union driven. Look, I don't know about you, but landlords are business people, and business people basically are all the same. There's some bad business people, but most business people are good. If you're a real estate agent, are you going to take advantage of your clients, or are you going to do the best job you can? If you're selling shoes, are you going to take advantage of your customers? Of course you're not. You're going to be good to your customers because those are the ones who are paying your bills and making you your money. So why is it all of a sudden landlords are bad, that they don't care about their clients, which is the tenants? Why does that happen? Everybody's in business. Businesses are all the same. So you have a product or a service and you sell it. You're going to be a bad plumber on a regular basis, it's insane. Yes, of course, there are bad actors. There's bad policemen. There's bad politicians. Believe me, there are a lot of those. There's bad teachers, but the far majority do what they're supposed to do. They take care of their property. Look, my perspective has always been, if you are the most money hungry person in the world, okay, and every penny means everything to you, and you want to accumulate as much as you can, you know what you do? You act like a great businessman. You do everything you can for your clientele. You're there for them. Okay. You go overboard to take care of them. And then you know what? The profits will flow to you even more. Oh. So in any event, the issue dealing with bad landlords, I think, is just a misnomer. And I think the issue and the stigma about landlords is just what that is. It doesn't exist, quite frankly. The percentage of people who are bad landlords are probably even less than any other purveyor of goods and services.
You know, I handle the flip side too, because we do tenant representation, you know, and placing them in rentals. So there are things that you can also do in interviewing the landlord. I mean, you can, you know, certainly look around the property. Is it well maintained? Is it taken care of? You could even talk to the neighbors. You could ask them, you know, what the history has been on the house. You know, have they had a lot of problems with tenants? You know, they'll be the first ones to tell you, hey, the landlord doesn't fix anything. I hate living next to this guy. You know, he's a slumlord. You know, I've had to call the county on him 6 times. You can call the county. You could ask if there's any violations on the property. Reviews, if you're using a management company, a lot of times the apartment complex, if it's a multifamily building, will have, you know, multiple bad reviews from prior tenants. So there are things that you can do to try and safeguard yourself, and looking at their contracts. I mean, a lot of the contracts will tell you whether a landlord, you know, is going to be friendly. As long as you do your end of the deal, are they going to do their end of the deal based on the lease itself, you know, and how, you know, what type of wording is in the lease? You know, a lot of these landlords, they have, you know, pretty heavy hitting, full of poison pills in their lease. And, you know, you can look at it and say, okay, maybe that's because, you know, they've been screwed many times, or maybe they're just greedy. So I do think, you know, I mean, I do believe, you know, like Dennis is saying, I mean, I do think landlords get a bad rap, but I can tell you that there are plenty of good landlords out there, and the mom and pop landlords have the best relationships typically with their tenants, and, you know, opposed to dealing with institutional investors that are going to raise your rent to the maximum amount that they possibly can. And they're going to fee you like crazy. And you see it on the leases. They get this fee, that fee, and, you know, the concierge trash service that comes, they charge you for, but yet they don't pick up the trash. I know many of tenants that have moved out of apartment buildings that was just a money grab, and it didn't happen. You had to take your own trash, or it sat there. You know, so I mean, there are things that you can do, Duke, that can flush out the bad actors. But yeah, I mean, it can go both ways.
I do see, though, that some tenants who are real malcontents will sit there and see prospective tenants coming into the building, and they'll talk down about the landlord, even though the landlord has done nothing wrong. You see that on things like Yelp, where you'll have people who would never think to leave bad reviews or good reviews for a landlord, but certainly people who are disgruntled or are getting evicted, and properly so, will give bad reviews. So I don't know if that's what the case is. But one thing that you did say that I do want to take task with you is you talked about these, you know, institutional people that are going to charge as much money for the rent as they possibly can. Hello, we're dealing with something called the free economy. Okay. If I want to charge $1 million for the car that I drive and I'm going to put it up for sale, I have the right to ask for that. And you know what? On a free economy, no one's going to come and buy it. If you're listing a house, Todd, for $2 million, and the house is worth $1 million, you certainly have the right to do that, but no one's going to buy the house. If we just got out of the business of tinkering with the market and let the free economy determine what the prices would be, everything would be fine. As soon as you start tinkering it, like putting in price controls for rent, what you're doing is you're making rents escalating. The economists have all said this. Everybody knows this. You can't have price controls. If you do, yes, maybe if there's a hurricane and somebody at a 7-Eleven is selling a bottle of water for $200, yes, that would be considered gouging. But other than that kind of a situation, the market is so proper in terms of determining what people will do. You want to buy a Chanel purse, if you have the money, fine. Otherwise, they'll sell as many as they possibly can. So that's the market price on what it is.
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying with that. Believe me, I don't think the government should get involved and put rent controls and things like that. I think free market should take hold. I think what I'm really kind of referring to is, like I've had tenants, and you and I have spoke about this. I've had tenants that have been in a property for 10 years and they treat it like it's their home. They have pride in that, in living there and taking care of the place. And I never raise the rent. And, that could be bad business on my behalf of not doing it, but you're not going to find an institutional investor doing that. I think it's more, you're going to appreciate more relationships dealing with mom and pop, and we're getting rid of them. We're getting rid of mom and pop, and, but you're going to have more relationships with them. The other thing is that big business will entice you to get inside too. They'll entice you with 15 months of rent, or a 15-month lease with the 12-month rate, free month, 3 months for free. And then they get you in there and they're raising the rents, and, and they're not very, you try and call them up. I mean, I know somebody right now is in an apartment and they're trying to get out. They want to buy a house, and their neighbor is so disruptive and so noisy that they can't even sleep at night. Now, a mom and pop is probably going to be more proactive in satisfying, making the tenant happy. And the apartment complex is basically saying, what do you want us to do about it? Call the cops. It's flip side. And I think the end result is that, policymakers, they're clueless. They've never written checks, most of them. They've never been entrepreneurs. They've never been business owners. They're clueless. And, a lot of these career politicians, you shouldn't be able to be a career politician. This shouldn't happen. And, I think that, I'm all about the free market. Yeah. So let's answer some more questions. I know we got.
Yep. We've got some more super chats here. Speaking of Florida, Hi, Charles. I think this is what it's saying is 2 tornadoes hit Florida today. So apparently the insurance companies got out in time. And then we have another one here. Voting for a government to give you everything you want has the power to take away everything you have.
Absolutely.
You're here to that one.
And another one, David, thank you so much for your super chat. We discussed the symptoms like it spontaneously appeared from the ether in order not to offend. Everyone with any sense knows the cause is virtue, signaling people of a certain voting persuasion. So thank you for those. We do have David. Some additional questions. We had a comment here. Dennis, after I heard your talk over the weekend, I don't want to do anything in Massachusetts. These idiots in Massachusetts want every California law.
And if you guys haven't watched the video from Saturday, I highly encourage you to do that. Also follow Dennis. He has a YouTube channel as well. Gives out a lot of great advice. If you are a real estate investor, a lot of people are thinking about it. I mean, I'm talking to people now. They're like, oh yeah, I want to invest in real estate. I'm like, what? Have you not listened to anything that's going on? I mean, geez, that's crazy. And a lot of Instagrammers, a lot of TikTokers, flashing cash, getting out of their sports cars, talking about making $250,000 a month, and most of these are people that just got into the business in less than 10 years ago, so they don't even know how badly they're going to get spanked when all of this comes tumbling
Well, we
down.
have it where an investor will buy a building, and it's incredulous. There's very little due diligence. It's a mom and pop. I just bought this 8-unit building, and uh, Dennis, the rents are really low. So I need your help to evict all the tenants, so this way I can get more rent. I'm going, well, where's your building? You go, well, it's in Los Angeles. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but there's something called rent control, and you just can't ask tenants who are on a month-to-month tenancy to leave. And they're going, you're kidding me. You mean I have to be stuck with this? I go, these questions should have been asked prior to buying it. So we see a lot of deer in headlights that these first-time buyers of these properties have no idea what they're getting involved in. They think it's a good deal, but they have come to grips with the with rent control and eviction requirements in Los Angeles right now, and actually in Los Angeles and unincorporated areas of LA County. You have a single family home and it's rented, okay? And tenants now is a 1-year lease. Now it's month to month. He's been there for 3 years. He pays his rent. He's a nice guy, okay? But you know what? I want to list my home with Todd Sachs. I want to sell. I want to, vacation someplace. I want out. So very few homes are going to sell with a tenant in possession. So it's going to be hard to show it. And then what if the new owner wants to move in? I'm going to have to deal with getting this guy out. So normally you would just serve the tenant with a notice to quit, just like you're terminating a month-to-month tenancy. In California, if you've been there longer than 1 year, the tenant is entitled to 60 days notice, right? Well, right now, that's not proper. They have reasons to evict. That's not one of them, that you can ask a tenant to move because you want to sell the property. Do you think that this is a tremendous invasion of your property rights? That I can't list my house now. I wanted to fix it up. I want to do something with it. I want to sell it. I can't ask the tenant to move because my only reason is because I want to sell the property. So this invasion of property rights that makes it insane, even for people. Hey, I've got 1 unit. It's a single family house. That's it. I'm not this big landlord with thousands of units. And by the way, the law should be fair for them as well, as I always talk about. There's no difference whether you own 40,000 units or if you own a duplex and you live in one side. Your property rights are your property rights. And let's not desecrate somebody who was so smart to get to a point where he owns 40,000 units. That's not a crime. That should be heralded as somebody with the American dream. But in any event, you're having a situation where I can't sell my property now because of the craziness of the laws. And again, these laws are there, in my mind, for one purpose only, is to keep one party in power, okay? Because those are the parties knows that those people will vote more for them because there's more tenants than there's landlords.
I want to just pick up on a couple things and sort of backtrack, because you mentioned something about, this mom and pop that bought the 8-unit building in Los Angeles and they want to kick the tenants out and raise the rents. Time and time again, it's funny, I see these properties listed for sale and the seller always says that the rents are undervalued. So they want all the money for the building, but yet they've been under market rents, for years, right? And they couldn't, just because they couldn't get the extra rent, you can. And so just be caution of that, and the other thing that leads me to another point that, Dennis, you said about somebody has a single family house and they want to sell it and it has a tenant in it in the rental. If you guys are thinking about real estate investments, investing in real estate, I'm going to tell you a little secret here. A single family house is worth more vacant. If you have a tenant in there and you're selling it, you're probably going to want to sell it vacant. And the reason is because you can sell it for more money to a home owner that wants to live in there, right? Chances are your rents aren't going to work. You want $550,000 or $700,000, whatever it is, for the price of the house. but yet you're only collecting $2,500 in rent. That's not going to cut it, right? That's not a good deal for an investor. Investors don't want to give you profit anyway. Investors they want to get profit. They want to buy income. They don't want to, buy losses. Multifamily buildings are more valuable with tenants in place, paying a rent where they can make profit based on what they buy it for at the rents that are being collected now successfully, not in delinquent status. So if you're looking to buy a house and you're like, oh, this is great, I'm going to buy this single family house, and there's a tenant in there with a 2-year lease, that could be a problem. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And I do want to say one thing, Dennis, and I love you, man, and I know you do you, and you do it well. But I don't think anybody should own 40,000 doors, man. I don't think that institutional investors, now maybe apartment buildings, yes, multifamily. I want to clarify that. But I know people that companies that own 10,000, 30,000 homes, single family houses, and that, in my opinion, should not be allowed.
No, this company, this man that I know, he has 40,000 units, but they're in multiple apartment buildings.
And I agree with you. That's the American dream. I mean, that's being an entrepreneur. That's where investors should be. They shouldn't be, in my opinion, these institutional buyers should not be competing for, single family houses.
I'll tell you the story just briefly. I won't tell you what country he came from, but he came to this country, and believe it or not, he slept in his car at a start. And then from sleeping in his car, he finally brought his family over. And now this individual has literally 40,000 units, which we service for him. But it's a true American story. And these people are not to be denigrated. They need to be revered for, living the American dream and doing what they're doing. And look at how many people he's employing. It's, hundreds and hundreds of people he's employing to take care of these units. And that's what gives back to society. And don't forget, landlords are income or housing providers. We provide a very valuable service for people. Where are people going to live if we're not providing them housing? So I think that these types of shows, show the other side that is not, quote, media driven, where we're not vilified by newspapers and everything else out there.
I want to pull up, and I know, Melissa, well, let's take a couple more questions.
We have a question for Dennis specifically. Dennis, can you review the part on Section 8 and how tough it is to get someone out, since you have to have $2,000 worth of unpaid rent and that the tenant would pay, not including the Section 8 contribution? Thank you.
Okay, I don't know that this is true in all areas of the country, but in the Los Angeles area, they have something called a threshold, which means that you can't serve, right now, they just changed it, but I think it's $2,076. It has to be above that for a 1-bedroom apartment. So in other words, if my rent is $2,000, that's below the threshold being $2,067, which means that I can't immediately start an eviction lawsuit in the month of January. I'm going to have to wait until February when he owes me $4,000, and then I'll be above the threshold. Okay. So basically, these rules dealing with Los Angeles and unincorporated areas of LA County are forcing landlords to wait for their rent. In other words, however long the eviction process is going to take, I can't start it for 30 days. Okay, then I can finally start this eviction process. And what happens if on the 25th day, the guy comes to you with $2,000? Well, in that situation, the tenant could pay his rent late every single month, wait till the 25th. Now, with Section 8, which is what they call government subsidized housing, in that situation, let's pretend the rent's $2,500 per month. And the government pays $23. That's pretty good. And the tenant only has to pay $200 per month. and you're in this same jurisdiction where they have this quote threshold before you can finally bring forth an eviction. Now, of course, the government's going to pay their $2,300. So that means for the month of January, the tenant owes $200 in this one-bedroom apartment. Well, that's way below the threshold. The threshold is above $267. So what does that mean? Can I wait to month 2? Well, then it's $400. Month 3, $600. How can I ever bring forth an eviction? Very simple. Just wait 11 months. 11 months, because by then it'll owe $2,200, and now I'm finally above the threshold. Where is the sanity in the laws that are being brought forth that, hey, I can't bring forth because my rent's too low? I can't bring forth an eviction? Now, you would think the people who made this, their position would be, hey, you know what? We want to make affordable rents, okay? We want to make affordable rents because that's what the populace needs. Okay, if I'm a landlord and I have a one-bedroom apartment, do you think I'm going to rent that apartment out for $2,000 and I'll be below the threshold? That would be insane. I'm going to go for $2,500 because the fair market value keeps going up each year by the urban or housing and urban development. It keeps going up every year. So I'm going to make it $2,500 because I don't want to get close to the fair market value, that threshold amount. So now I won't be able to bring forth an eviction. I'm going to have to wait maybe 2 months. And God forbid I have a Section 8 tenant. I'm going to have to wait 11 months before I can enforce my rights. So this is insanity, what's happening here in California with this, quote, threshold amount.
You know, I personally haven't. I mean, I have a lot of landlords that will say, you know, I don't want to rent to Section 8 or voucher tenants. You know, here in Maryland, you can qualify them the same as any other tenant. I know you guys have a little different system in California. Of course you do. But, you know, here in Maryland, you still can check credit and make a credit requirement. About 2 years ago, they made it illegal to discriminate against voucher holders. So source of income can't be a disqualifying or a disqualification to you're accepting a tenant or not. And I've had very good experience with it personally. I mean, I've had, you know, voucher tenants. And the nice thing about it is the money's there. I can tell you, even on my good tenants, when I used to have more residential than I do now, I only have a couple residential rentals. But when I had many more, collecting rent, I mean, they're always late. I mean, even a good tenant, most of the time, you know, it's not like you're sending out an invoice and they're, like, you know, promptly paying it. And then we went to just doing it in their bank account, you know, ACH out of the bank account. And then that would be a problem if they didn't have the money in there. And then it messed my account up and messed their account up. And that was disastrous. But the nice thing with the voucher program is that you have to be paid by the first of every month or the state will lose their federal funding on it. So, you know, I think that I tell landlords that that's a good thing. But I do understand, you know, that it has, you know, some, you know, a lot of people don't want to do it. And Dennis, you had something that was very interesting. You said something in our last stream where it's a loophole with Section 8. So just kind of talk about that.
Well, first of all, and again, this is not an empirical study. This has just been my experience over the last 47 years of landlords dealing with Section 8 tenants, and that the wear and tear on the unit for whatever reason is much greater. So when the tenant does vacate, the cost to rehabilitate that unit is much higher. And we see just many more problems with regard to Section 8 tenants in terms of their demeanor to other tenants. Again, this is not a study. Certainly, it's not an empirical study, but it is just telling you what my experience had been from listening to my clients.
It's harder to get rent increases too. I mean, you're not getting the rent. You're not getting market rent increases with Section 8.
Right. You cannot get a rent increase unless you get approval from your Section 8 advisor. So that puts it down. And then you're dealing with something called inspections. They have these inspections yearly. And if the tenant doesn't prepare the unit for the inspection or doesn't let the inspector in, then the punishment is
You don't
that
get
the
paid.
landlord is cut off. So we don't get our rent. So I'm not a big fan, though I do have a lot of clients who deal with Section 8 tenants, but they just started this new law in California that says you cannot use a credit score against a tenant, a low credit score, to reject their application if they can prove to you a valid source of income. So the source of income, let's pretend they can show, hey, I can pay this money, here's my income sources. Then you can't use their credit to reject their application. That just started January 1st of 2024. So that's kind of shaken up our industry because a lot of people just don't want that as their business model. But here you're having the government tell you what you can and can't do and how you can run your business. I have found out that, and this I got from one of my clients, that Section 8 will not accept a situation where you're offering a month-to-month tenancy. They need at least a 1-year lease, or they will not allow that tenant to join your tenancy. Well, there's a lot of rules in California that now I'm recommending to all my clients having nothing to do with Section 8, that you do not rent on a 1-year lease. Just do month-to-month tenancy because of all these rent control laws. You have a lot more flexibility if the tenant goes rogue on you. And so therefore, with regard to Section 8, if that's their criteria, that they will not lease to you, as long as your positions for every tenant, every applicant, I do not do 1-year leases. I only do month-to-month tenancies because I have more strength in terms of if I need to terminate the tenancy, then I think you can avoid Section 8. But I don't know why it is when you have these malcontents in the building that are just complaining about everything. Why is it, and anybody out there, correct me if I'm wrong, when these people come to rent from you and they're going through the application process, they seem so damn nice. It's unbelievable. They're complimenting your hair. They're telling how beautiful place is. They say, I don't need the windows to come up and down. It's okay with me. Don't even worry about cobwebs. I'll do my own cleaning. And as soon as they get in, oh my God, they're calling you up every 15 minutes. The other tenants call you up once every 9 months. Hey, this broke. Please fix it. Okay. This person's calling you up every 15 minutes. You know, there's a crack in the switch plate. Really? There's a crack in the switch plate? I have an ant in my kitchen. Well, where's your uncle? So we just see this time and time again where these people get into the building. We call them malcontents. So you want to have some control that for a short term, you do have the right in many jurisdictions, not in all, but in many jurisdictions to terminate the tenancy. But if you're on a 1-year lease, you're stuck. But it's also another method that I believe that you can reject, or the Section 8 will reject you because you're only doing it on a month-to-month tenancy.
We had another question here, and bear with me one moment. Dennis, could you put a clause in a rental agreement that would require the renter to agree to waive any rights to government mandates on rent deferment?
I don't think so. First of all, there's this thing with the rent deferment only came up because of something that we've never seen in our lives called COVID. And again, I'm not minimizing that. I'm just saying that, yes, for the first year and a half, no question, businesses were closed down if you are in those unconscionable states. But I don't see that really coming up again. But again, if the city or the state makes an emergency order, it doesn't matter what's in your rental agreement. For example, you can have a clause in your rental agreement that you're allowed to commit a murder. Obviously, that can't be adhered to. In California, you can have a clause in your rental agreement that prohibits jury trials during the cost and how difficult it is and the length. And for all of us to be able to get through our disputes quickly, we're saying no jury trials. That's outlawed in the state of California. So I don't see any way of putting something in your rental agreement that will get rid of a rent deferment. But again, you do need to have a strong rental agreement that covers so many issues so that the landlord is protected in these situations.
Well, I'm back up. I'm having the weather must be getting worse outside. I'm surprised we are still connected. So if we do go out, by the way, Melissa and Dennis, you guys got to keep
We
it
got
going.
you.
If
We got
you
you.
if
Oh,
you
we
see
can
us
do
go
it.
out all of a sudden, you guys keep the
Easy.
thing going here. We'll be fine. We've got the boat outside. Joe and I will make it. But anyway, I want to pull up here, and I do want to take more questions. But I just want Dennis. The last time you and I spoke, we were talking about how your governor thinks that you have more migration coming to California than Florida. And I just wanted to pull it up because on worldpopulationreview.com, and this is kind of interesting, guys, you can look at your own state here also. But as far as the population and population growth, you guys are from 23 to 24, you're down 0.29%, and Florida's up 1.84%. So I just wanted to show you that the stats here go against what your governor says about people flocking into California. It looks like you're still losing population, but you are up 4.15% in population since 2010. But Florida's up 22.75. And if we just tap on this growth rate and kind of, all right, so Joe's lost his. So you guys aren't seeing what I'm putting down. You aren't seeing what I'm putting down here. But anyway, let me save you here we go. In New York, they have had a negative 0.92% growth rate. So people are still flocking out of New York. And in the last 10 years, they're negative 0.32%. Growth in New York. But anyway, I just wanted to, last time we were kind of talking about, because I want to know why everybody was leaving your state. Now I know. I mean, I'm talking to you.
How about the fact that you're paying 13% taxes, and if you earn more than $1 million, they add on another percent. Also, they just started something in the city of Los Angeles. You'll love this. That it's called a mansion tax.
Oh, I know all about it, but tell everybody what it means.
Yeah, so under the mansion tax, if you're selling a property, commercial, residential, doesn't make any difference, for $5 million or more, you have to pay, I think it's 4.5%. You have to pay that to the city of Los Angeles. Now, if it's above 10%, then I think it's 8% or 8.5% that you have to pay to the city of Los Angeles. So they're just really putting roadblocks for people to earn, buy property and sell property, and just making it where people are just flying out of this state, flying out of the city. I myself had in my office building in the city of Los Angeles, and they have a gross receipts tax. So in other words, if you bought something for $10 and you sold it for $10, and you made nothing, okay? Of course, your expenses still, but you made nothing. The city of Los Angeles would want 1.5% of that sale. It didn't matter what profit you made. So, and then again, they would audit us every year, to make sure that we were giving them the right figures. So what I did was very simple. I moved like 3 miles to the east. It was 8-minute further drive, and I moved to a beautiful city called Burbank. And everybody knows that all the studios are in Burbank. And the reason why they're there is because when I went to get my business license, and I walked into the beautiful Burbank City Hall, walked up to the counter and said, I need a business license. They said, no problem. Where's your building and this? And I got my business license, and I said, how much? They go, $79. Now, I was paying 6 figures a year to the city of Los Angeles. This is $79 Let me tell you something, Todd. I was so happy to pay that. You have no idea. So we're now in a city called Burbank with all the other studios, and I love it. And you get service. I don't know about like in New York or where you are, but you call the police, they're there. We had a bunch of. I'm probably going to get everybody to move to Burbank, but when you move into a building, you have a bunch of extra trash, right? So we called Burbank Sanitation. Hey, we need an extra pickup. I was on the phone with this person within 2 minutes. Somebody came. And then the response was, can I get an extra pickup? And the response was, what day would you like us to come and what time? So the service from Los Angeles to this, and yet who's getting all this tax money? How are states like Texas and Florida operating so well without state taxes? How does that happen? So we have mismanagement in government and putting the hurt on our industry, the income property owners industry, is without question.
Yeah. How about this one, thehill.com? Can you pull anything up, Joe, or you can pull it up? All right. I want to talk about crime in California while we're picking your state apart. Retail theft. Dennis, look, nothing against you, man. I just, I want you to keep these things in California, but I don't think it's working. It's coming everywhere. But retail theft is the worst in these 10 U.S. cities. The National Retail Federation. We wonder, we got a lot of issues. And guys, we all need to pay attention to these kind of things because, if it's not happening where you live, that's great. But like I said, the Walgreens here locks up deodorant here in Maryland. And but these businesses are going away. People aren't going to malls. I mean, we're starting to really see, decline in a lot of our retail sectors. We have commercial buildings, office buildings that are vacant. But anyway, on top of all of that, we were talking about smash and grabs and things like that earlier. But the National Retail Federation, the world's largest retail trade association, according to its website, recently released its 2023 Retail Security Survey. The report contains insight from 177 retail brands, which accounted for $1.6 trillion of annual retail sales in 2022 and represents more than 97,000 retail locations across the U.S. Overall, retailers that participated in the survey reported that inventory loss, called shrink, clocked in an average of 1.6% last year, representing $112.1 billion in losses. But the point I'm getting at here is, look, based on inventory losses, the NRF found that the cities most impacted by retail theft last year: Los Angeles, California; Oakland,
Wow.
San Francisco, California; Houston, Texas; New York City; Seattle, Washington; Atlanta, Georgia; Sacramento, California; and Chicago and Illinois. They all tied. Denver, Colorado; Miami, Florida; and Albuquerque, New Mexico. They tied.
You have these district attorneys that are refusing to file charges. Everybody gets out of jail in 1 second. They get processed and they get put back on the street. We had a recall against a guy by the name of George Gascon here in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, there was some sort of a problem with the write-in ballots or the initiative, so it didn't qualify. But sure, if you're going to encourage people to steal, people will steal. It's as simple as that. You have cashless bail. You get a ticket for stealing $999. I wonder if these smash and grabs people went into some of the elected officials' homes and only took $990. And I don't think they would really care, right? Because let's put them right back on the street and they can get to the next elected official's house. But this is where we're faced with now, with this entitlement of society, and where people are just being taken care of. That's all. Nobody has any kind of a work ethic. People just want to be taken care of. And if they can't have it, then they steal it.
I'm wondering if it isn't intentional. And, that we instill fear in the American people and we don't do anything about it. We just let it happen. and we instill fear in the American people. And what we do by that is we end up giving up more of our control or more of our privacy, because they say, hey, things are really bad, guys. We have to do all of this additional surveillance. We have to do all of this additional level of control in order to keep you all safe. So let's smash and grab, make people in fear, and then let's institute all these more controls. I think it's a bigger plan. Look at this one, abc7.com. Smash and grab robberies in California. New bill would provide stricter penalties for retail theft. Hello. Here you go. San Bernardino, California, smash and grab robberies have become a common occurrence across the state of California, but could there soon be stiffer penalties? It goes on to say here that, they're going to have police drones. They're now flying to protect the public. They're now flying police drones to surveillance the areas to keep shoppers safe. And they're also watching from, the articles go on to say about how they've instituted all these cameras, police cameras, and now they're sitting in one location monitoring a whole bunch of cameras. It's kind of crazy. Let's reduce they could steal up to $990, whatever it is, $1,000 without it being a felony conviction. And then we let it become such an issue that we need to institute more control. What do you think of that? Do you think I'm off base?
No, of course not. The cost to retailers to have security guards and surveillance, this is all based on this permissiveness that, gee, it's really bad that this person who needed something and just stole it now has to go to jail. It's this good intentions, but without thought of what the real thing is going to occur to society. You can't have a permissive society where people are allowed to steal. I don't know. It's like in an upside down world that I even have to be saying this. What you put up that newspaper article saying that there'll be jail time for the second time somebody steals. You know what? Let's make a jail time for the first time somebody steals.
They're not going to put them in
kill
jail.
one person but I can't kill the second person? Is that what you're telling me? So I don't understand where we're going in this society, except that it's all these, quote, do-gooders who want to foist their opinions on us, but they don't understand that where it goes with these opinions.
We'll shut down the malls. We'll shut down retailers. They're not going to want to, they're closing their store locations. They're like, I can't stay in operation here with the amount of theft that's occurring. It's not fun to shop. Maybe we'll all support Amazon.
Well, that's
maybe
exactly
we'll all
what's
support
happening.
Walmart. Maybe that's what happened. Look at this other article that I was talking about here. This CBS News flash mob. Can you pull it up, Joe, or not? CBSnews.com. I'll read it to you. It's Los Angeles, a flash mob of at least 17 masked thieves who pushed past holiday shoppers to rob a Nike store Sunday night near Los Angeles is exactly the kind of crime cities across the country are trying to crack down on this holiday season. It goes on to say that a new annual Gallup poll on personal safety shows more Americans fear becoming victims of crime, with 40% of respondents to the poll saying that they were afraid to walk alone at night within a mile of their home, the highest such number in the poll since 1993. 50% of respondents feared getting their car stolen. 17% said they avoid going to the mall. Here it says, even in posh Beverly Hills, right around the corner from you, officials say that they're determined to keep shoppers safe. Police drones are now in the air 14 hours a day after a brazen daylight attack. You guys, you like that? You want to be under surveillance 14 hours a day when you go shopping. Your every move is on recording, right?
I don't have a problem with that because I'd rather be safe. And if I'm in the public, then anybody can take a picture of me anyway. But
that's not going to keep you safe.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe the best thing to keep us safe is that we should all defund the police, right? Isn't that going to help? That sounds like a
let's
great idea.
Let's take some more questions. Because then I want to talk about jobs. What's our poll, by the way? I want to look at our poll.
Let's pull up the poll.
What do we got? I can't see the poll. My computer's, I'm kicked off. I think our Wi-Fi is down.
You're telling me how many people are watching now?
If Joe puts it up,
No.
I can read the poll.
No.
Is Joe able to put a picture of it up?
We'll see. He's fanatically going at it over there, trying to recover our. We still have power. That's good. Usually
That is good. I can ask a question in the meantime. We do have a
Maybe
super
Todd,
chat
you should
here.
pay your bill. Maybe that's
Yeah, I know, right? That's right.
Okay, Dennis, we have the super chat here. Thank you so much. What ramifications can arise from LLC Disclosure Act? I believe they meant to say 2024 cause, if any. Thanks.
I'm not sure what you're referring to with an LLC Disclosure Act, unless they're talking about that you have to disclose who the members of the LLC are, would be my only guess with that. And should that be disclosed? I don't see why not. You have, officers of the corporation can be disclosed. An LLC, which is what they call a limited liability company, which is a popular form, certainly in California and probably across the nation, of a way of holding title. The reason for an LLC, and of course my firm does them too, through my daughter, who's also an attorney, Madison Block, is that you shield your liability. That is, if I have two buildings, each in its own LLC, if somebody is injured in one building and they sue me, they sue for the asset of that building, they can't touch all the assets that I have. But that would be the only thing I could guess with regard to what that question is about, that people have to disclose their ownership in an LLC.
Are you up, Joe? Oh, here we go. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So our poll, if you guys haven't voted yet, you can. We'd like to get everybody included here. We got 658 votes. The question was, what's your biggest concern? And property rights, homelessness, crime, jobs. Looks like property rights are the number one concern of our audience here tonight. Homelessness ranking at the bottom of it. 28% crime and 20% jobs. I do want to talk about our jobs market because you guys are going to find this hard to believe. But the jobs reports, apparently we were not told the truth. And I don't want to be right.
Oh, God.
And I mean, time is always crystal clear when we can look back and see, if some of the things that we predicted or said would happen actually happened or not. But I can remember many podcasts saying that these adjustments to wages or job reports always come later. They push out quickly this job number to make everything like it's doing fantastic, and then they come back and adjust non-farm payroll and things like that. But here you go. This is January 6th, yahoofinance.com. Initial U.S. employment reports overstated by 439,000 jobs in 2023. There's something wrong with this previous U.S. jobs report. The government quietly erased 439,000 jobs through November of 2023. A closer look at the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that means its initial job results were inflated by 439,000 positions, and the job market is not as healthy as the government suggests. Since the government wiped out 439 jobs after the fact, the total percentage of jobs created by the government last year is even higher. Increased government hiring has been driving the job numbers higher. So the government's the one that's creating all these jobs. Other than the government, the economy, I guess, the jobs market isn't as good as they said. So it's interesting to see that in our poll, so many people are concerned about jobs. Dennis, what do you think? Do you think we're going to soft land this plane, or what do you think is going to happen with a recession this year, or no?
I'm not an economist. I'm just a poor lawyer trying to eke out a living, but and representing income property owners. But I just see that this governmental intrusion and the regulation after regulation is just trying to destroy the fabric of our society and the basis of our society, which was why this country was founded on a free economy, religious freedom and a free economy. And I think we're just going the wrong direction in this country. You see this, the government misreading the jobs report. I mean, maybe we could underestimate our taxes. It's no problem for the government to inflate joblessness. Maybe we should just underreport, what we're earning. So, but I think it has to sink down further. And then I think enough people will have realized that they've been drinking Kool-Aid and that they have to understand about people's rights, property rights, and that there should be limited government. I mean, that government is there to serve a purpose, but it's not to sit there and cradle you from from birth to the grave. It does away with our initiative when you're just sitting there and looking for a handout at every step of the way.
Melissa, how about some more questions for Dennis? I know, guys, if
Yes.
you have questions for Dennis, comment them in. I mean, it isn't often that we can have somebody that is so knowledgeable on property rights, and somebody coming from California have questions. I know a lot of our audience is from California. I mean, when we look at the analytics, such a highly populated state, one of the largest states, the highest populations in the country. So chat your questions in. Dennis would love to answer them.
So here's another question. Dennis, how is landlord property divided in a divorce?
Well, of course, California has community property. Other states do not. In most states, if the property was the sole ownership of one of the spouses, and there was no mixing of labor for that. In other words, it was just being maintained, and then generally who's ever on title with that would be entitled to the full source of the property in a divorce proceedings. But in most situations, property is bought in the names of both spouses, so that's going to be split equally. Also, if in California, dealing with community property, if money is commingled and like the income from the apartment house is going into some account, and then the landlord is taking care of the building, that's his labor, and he's taking care of the building, then that's going to be considered an asset of the marriage and will be split.
Okay, great. We got another question here for you. Is there any way to stop a HOA foreclosure, or is it pretty much determined?
Well, when you purchase a condominium or a townhouse, you agree to the terms and conditions that has been set up by the homeowners association. Now, normally when there's a foreclosure, it's based on the fact that the homeowner did not pay his dues. Every month, there's a certain amount of fees that you have to pay to the homeowners association. So we'll see this all the time where the homeowner doesn't. And then in California, you have to serve on them a notice of default. That gives them 90 days to correct the deficiency. If they don't, then they can do what they call a notice of sale. And then the property is sold at auction and someone will pick it up potentially, or it will be revert back to the homeowners association. Now, a lot of times homeowners associations are reticent to do this because while they will get title to the property, the title is still subject to the loans that are on the property. And if the guy is underwater, has more loans than the value of the condominium or the townhouse, then what is the homeowners association going to get? So they're going to get a liability as opposed to an asset. So really the best way to stop a foreclosure, really simple, pay what you're supposed to pay. And then no one's going to serve you with a notice of default. But if it makes sense for the homeowners association to foreclose, then they will, and they'll take it subject to whatever loans are on the property. But again, you'll be forced out of the property.
Okay,
And so
great.
beware when you're moving into a property that is governed by a homeowner association or a condominium association, because they do have a lot of power. You talk about a loss of property rights, go into a HOA, and it's amazing. I've worked for so many HOAs through the years, and they will put board members on the board to sort of get their agendas pushed through. So they can change. The regulations can change. That's why you vote in board members every so often. They have terms that they run for, and but definitely look at them. Too many people don't read them. And here in Maryland, and I'm sure that's the same way in other states, when you're buying, you are entitled a period to review the condo or HOA documents and cancel the contract, get out for, here in Maryland, zero cause. You could just, for anything that's in the documents, you could say, I no longer wish to proceed. But by the time most people get their documents, they've already paid for their inspections, they've paid for their appraisals, they've already packed up, they're ready to move, they're expecting them, and they get these documents and it's a binder, or if it's a paper, if they're provided in actual paper form, or they submit everything electronically, and you look at this voluminous file and you're like, yeah, and you're not looking at it. Most people don't look at it, and then they move in and realize that they can't have 3 dogs, they can only have 2 dogs, or they can't fence in their property, or they can only build a certain kind of fence, or they can't, enclose their deck. And I mean, all these different things. They can't change the color. They can't even build a deck without going through the architectural committee and submitting plans and showing what colors you want to use and all this stuff. So I see a lot of people move into HOAs. And here in Maryland, we also have master HOAs and or planned unit developments. So you could have 2 HOA fees, and what happens is you go to sell, and then you have to get like a letter of compliance where the master association will come, send somebody and inspect your property to make sure that you haven't done anything that violates certainly the master association, and then you have to fix that stuff or cure it or disclose to the buyer that you've been bad and you put the wrong windows in when you replace the windows to your house. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, it's crazy. I don't like
Todd, I have a
HOAs.
question for you. You're obviously involved in selling a bunch of real estate. How many of the people who you represent actually read those documents?
I would go to say most of them don't.
Right? I mean, they go on
most
and
of them
on
don't.
for pages. I bought an office building and I got an SBA loan on it. And I thought I read it fully. And they said, oh, we need your proof of your life insurance. I go, why do I need proof of my life insurance? Well, it's in the contract. You have to have life insurance. I said, well, I do have life insurance, but I didn't know it was a requirement for getting a loan on an SBA loan. So it's really difficult to do this. And then, of course, everybody signs with DocuSign or any other electronic signature. So it's even more difficult unless you print it out to read this stuff. I had an ex-partner once told me when I was buying some property, and I said, I'm going to look at all this stuff I have to read. He says, look, if you want it, just sign it. So, but most of the time you should take a look at these documents and understand, not only just read them, but understand what you're reading, because there can be some very provisions in that are adverse to your position.
Yeah, when it's the bank, especially. You're talking about SBA, but let's go the investor route for a second. A lot of people, they want to buy an investment property and they're getting a commercial loan. There's a lot of fraud, first of all, in banking, because people say they're going to occupy the house and they get these 30-year fixed rate mortgages. That's not the way real life happens, right? If you want to invest in properties, you get commercial finance. If you're not living in the property, you should be getting, if you're not going with a Freddie Mac loan, a government loan where they will do an investor loan in your name, by the way, not an LLC, and you can get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. But most commercial loans are 5 and 10-year balloon loans. They'll amortize the loan over 20 or 25 years. You put down 20%, 30% down, and you get a commercial loan. Well, a lot of people don't realize when they take that commercial loan out that that bank cross collateralizes everything you have, including your personal residence. People forget about it. They're happy. They're like, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll sign this, personally guaranteeing it with my home. My spouse signs, everybody signs. And then they forget. And 5 years later, the loan balloons, or 10 years, the loan balloons. And then they're like, oh, wow, man, they can come after everything I have. So, we just want it. When we just want something, we just sign away, and we don't think about, that the devil sitting across the table from you that's going, very good, just keep signing, keep signing, keep signing.
Certainly with income property, residential income property, it's not just a matter of buying the property and making sure that you've read all the documents, the purchase agreements, and all the things you're signing. You need to check out whether you can get insurance for the building. If you can't get insurance, you can't buy the building. So you need to check that out, whether you can get insurance. You also need to check out what are the local rules. Like I told you about that one couple that bought this 8-unit building and had no clue about rent control. So it's not just buying the building and understanding your loan commitments and what is in the building, but it's also knowing the local laws for the areas that you're at, and they can really vary. State laws, local laws, make sure you know what you're doing before you jump into these things, because you can really get hurt with this. You put all your life savings into a 6-unit building and you didn't realize that there was rent control area where you are and that you can never get any more money for that unit.
Hey, I'll go one step further. A lot of people buy properties all the time that they think are multi-unit buildings, and they're not. They were never permitted for that. I mean, you could see in Baltimore, it happens a lot. It'll say it's a 3-unit or a 4-unit building. It's a house that's been chopped up and divided into 4 units. And we've gone even as far, and Melissa will tell you, because we go down this avenue, man. We chase we'll have a client that'll say, yeah, I want to buy this, 4-unit or 3-unit, and look at it and it's like, okay, well, I just called the county or the city and it's not permissible. It's a 1-unit dwelling. The landlord built this thing out illegally and they've been operating it that way. That's not a defense. You can't say, well, I bought it as a 3-unit building. No, now it's your responsibility if you get cited or violated. Or the other thing is that the departments don't even communicate with each other. A landlord can go get a rental license, 3 rental license in a house that is only permitted by zoning to have 1 unit. Zoning is going to be the one that that comes after you and cites you, not the rental license department. So if you guys are buying multifamily dwellings, please do yourself a favor and see if zoning allows it, that it actually is a legal multi-unit building, because I see a lot of people, they get in trouble with that. They get shut down. They've got to now, they're getting fined $500 a day until they cure it. And a lot of times you can't just walk in and get a hearing to where they'll approve it. They probably won't approve it.
Well, in Los Angeles, for example, if you buy a property and you thought it was 3 units and really it was somebody converted a garage and they have a tenant in there, the laws for the city of Los Angeles states that once you get that order to comply to discontinue that for a living space, the tenant, number one, has no obligation to pay you rent. You have to go through an eviction procedure. And best part, you got to pay the tenant relocation. What is the relocation?
Absolutely.
It's anywhere from $12,000 to $24,000 that you get hit with for the privilege that I didn't know. Well, it doesn't matter whether you knew or you didn't know, or even if you did it yourself, you're going to be responsible for that. And the tenant can sit there as long as he likes until you evict him and pay him the relocation money. And there's no rental obligation.
Hey, Dennis, how about this one? And Baltimore City just changed this law, but this was the way it was for a long time. If you didn't have a rental license, you couldn't evict the tenant. So if you, yeah, and I could tell you, so many landlords do not have rental licenses. They don't get them. So, when we're placing tenants or when we're representing landlords, we're making sure if they don't have a rental license, we're not taking it, because you have to provide them with a copy of your rental license. And the other thing is lead paint. So what they don't do is they don't register. In Maryland, we have lead paint laws, which are not federal. It's not the same in every state. But if you're a landlord and you're listening and you have a rental property in Maryland and it has lead paint, it's not if you're going to get sued, it's when you get sued. It's bad, right? And we've got videos on that. You can go to our channel and search lead paint. One of my friends owns a company called Probe. Neil Roseman. He is the king of
Todd, you cut out on there
lead
really
paint.
quick.
But I think it was
Todd,
okay. All right. Yeah.
just mention it. You
hear
cut out lead probe. I just think that you should just mention that one more time because it did
Yeah.
cut out, and that's important.
Yeah, so we've got a video on our YouTube channel, lead probe, and I apologize for tonight. We've had all kinds of technical difficulties on our end. It hasn't come through to you guys, but we're getting some really bad weather. But anyway, lead paint here in Maryland is a big problem. If you're renting, you're a landlord, and you have lead paint in your home, and I'm not talking about lead free. I'm talking about if they're not lead free properties, they're pre-1978 properties, and you have tenants in there, it's going to be a problem. And I think it was in 2011. I could be wrong, but I think the date was 2011. That I think it was 22,000 was the cap on what a claimant could win in a lead paint case against the landlord, and they agreed that that wasn't enough money because of the amount of harm that it caused. The people that were, poisoned by had lead paint poisoning, and they couldn't decide on what a number should be, so they just didn't make a ceiling on what a claim could, what a claimant could be awarded. And it's a nightmare here in Maryland. In Baltimore City, especially, we have a lot of pre-1978 properties. So you guys are listening and you have rentals right now and they're not lead free, sell them. I would be out of that business in a second, New York second.
I hear you on that. There are so many these regulations that, I don't know whether with the lead-based paint in Los Angeles, obviously there's more buildings built prior to 1978. That's when they ended lead in paint. But you have to be certified. Obviously, these buildings aren't, just because you have lead in your building, you're not getting sued. But because probably since 1978, there's probably 4 layers of good paint on top of that. But as paint is chipping, or if you're going to deal with that, you have to be, as a painter, you have to be certified in removal of lead in order to allowed to do that job. And if you don't, the homeowner can get sued, or the person with the building can get sued for like $100,000 for not having a licensed painter who's lead certified work on that. But these laws are there. Certainly having lead there, unless you're a child, I don't know how many people are picking up lead paint and eating it. Children, of course, do. I don't think adults do. So I think it is a little bit overrated. But again, if you do have chipping paint and your building was built before 1978, then you should take care of that and use a specialist.
The crazy part about it is people think that they're like, well, my kids don't chew on the windowsills and stuff like that, but it's not it isn't that as much as the dust. So what happens is, like a lot of the casing, window casing, they put the windows up and they put them down, and every time they're moving the window, dust is created, and that dust is what's getting ingested and and breathed in. So a lot of the contamination, is because of the amount of the dust, the dust from the chips, not so much that they're eating it. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And, and chances are, so if you're a landlord and you're listening to this and you're going, wow, my house was 1965 and, I'm panicked now because, Todd's telling me that I'm going to get sued because of lead paint. They knew in the 40s here in, Maryland or in the US, I mean, they knew early on that lead paint, years before they had the cutoff date in 1978, that lead was bad. And a lot of the houses, even in the 60s and 70s, they didn't use lead-based paint. And if they did, it's primarily around window casings and moldings and things like that. And then, of course, outside, they used it, quite a bit on thresholds and things like that. But and outside, siding. Asbestos siding, by the way, but that's another story.
It never stops.
Yeah, it never stops. But but great. I mean, great show tonight, Dennis. I mean, it's nice to bring this type of topic to our audience. I mean, it's not something that we really have spoken about before, but it is a concern because I do realize that there's a lot of contention between the tenants and the landlords, and I understand that there's way more tenants than there are landlords, and I do know that the contention from Wall Street or just investors buying up our single family housing, and but I think that the ship has sailed. I think that we're coming into a time where it's not going to be cool to own rental properties, residential rental properties. Is not going to be cool. And if you guys are just getting into it, or that you have, really over the last couple of years started adding these to your portfolio and you probably overpaid for them, you may want to consider getting rid of them. I'm not trying to, tell you what to do, but I'm just saying you may want to consider looking at a lot of people, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the risk reward. If you're making $500 a month or $6,000 a year family rental, and you think that's good, when you get your first tenant changeover and you spend $20,000 going in, and or paying people like Dennis $20,000 to evict people, you quickly realize it's not what it's cracked up to be. It's not what everybody thinks it is. And not saying that it can't be done, but I think we're about to see a big change.
Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. I appreciate that.
We appreciate you. And like I said, guys, if you want to cruise on over to Dennis's YouTube channel, you can check him out. The link is in the show notes. You can subscribe to him if you are a tenant and you have questions.
And or landlords. We give advice both ways. And again, we do have every Saturday, we have a Zoom meeting, which you can get on my website. Their credentials, evict123.com. And it's Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can either watch the live Zoom or you can participate.
There you go.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your comments and questions this evening. And Dennis, thank you so much for your time and spending it with us this evening, and really great information. And so thankful.
Appreciate everybody.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we thank you for spending your Tuesday evening with us, and drop your comments below. We love to hear from you, what you thought about tonight's show. And we've got some real cool guests coming up. We have Danielle DiMartino Booth. Was she live with us next Tuesday,
next week?
Melissa?
Yeah, next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday night. We have Danielle was the Fed Fisher. She was the aide to him, assistant to him, advisor to him in the Dallas Fed. Ron Fisher, back in the great financial crisis. She spent 9 years in the Federal Reserve, was in the in the room with these guys as they were trying in Bernanke, trying to work their way through the great financial crisis of 2008. She'll be live next Tuesday night. So bring your comments and questions for Danielle. She's going to tell us what she thinks is going to happen and what the Fed's going to do here at the end of this month. We all think that Powell's going to pivot, that we think the pressure is probably tremendous right now. We know that banks are not really acting on these balloon commercial loans that have ballooned. They're signing extensions because they don't want that to really hit the news. We know that there's a big commercial banking. We're on the cusp of a crisis with that. Office buildings, apartment complexes. And so it's going to be an exciting show next week. And Dennis, we appreciate you. We'll be talking to you soon.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Thank
See
you
y'all
so
next
much.
time.
Bye, guys.